バトルスピリッツにこそ秘められている。
ドスピに
I mean, you're in a card game anime. Would you really expect any less? Continuing from the last episode, Yaiba showed off his big bow to his little brother like most asshole brothers would. Okay, but seriously, it was obviously meant to be an arc to evacuate the people from the oncoming apocalypse. The construction of it was being handled by the steelworkers of Atlantia, which we had been seeing throughout the series. And obviously, we just assumed much of it was going to stuff like cars and motorcycles, but Yaiba had commissioned them for a much bigger side project that he never revealed the exact details of to his workers. This of course got Tsurugi to question his choice, as it was both shady as hell, and would sow seeds of distrust amongst his workers who might even end up half-assing the job. However, he just as quickly retracted this when his brother gave him this look, which fair enough I guess. Well, okay, actually, Tsurugi did manage to pick up that there was more to it that he couldn't see at first, to which his brother immediately explained that he understandably didn't want to cause civil unrest by telling everyone that God was about to go Old Testament on their asses. Thus, even though he was morally against it, he also understood what would happen if people knew the truth.
Panic! 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 We're all gonna die!
I mean, just imagine if a protagonist clad in red got the bright idea to instill fear and discourse amongst an already on edge society by letting them in on secrets that they really should know about. Oh, your day will come soon. Yaiba further elaborated by explaining his backstory when he was taken to the sacred grounds as a part of his training as the heir to the throne with their father and Gardos. The whole idea for it having come from the latter, which, yeah, is already not a good sign. However, he did for the most part do what he was supposed to and let them contact God through a magical circle. It ended up showing the young Yaiba a vision of the cataclysmic future that he was currently trying to prevent. Though, after seeing this, he did recollect what happened afterwards, as the next thing he knew, he was back in the palace, and their father was just kind of dead of an unknown disease. So, did God create COVID? Man, what a jerk. Later, Amuro returned to the castle, along with Bringer, and as usual, Tsurugi just had a very wholesome reunion with his robo-buddy.
お前それ嬉しくて踊り出したいって
Well, just don't push yourself too hard, or else you'll end up like your big brother Atlas. Amuro also had a message from their mother, that being that she wanted to take possession of her son's sword brave so that they could work to properly secure the Sword of Judgment. Of course, Yaiba denied her, believing that he could handle its power. However, he did give her the chance to take it through, of course, a card game. The battle played out with Amuro using her usual life regeneration effects to the point that she even got 6 lives at one point. However, the real battle turned out to be a war of words between the king and his former vassal.
世は王として道を誤ったと思うか。
いえ
He also revealed that he knew from the start that she was associated with the Red Army, which of course also hinted at why he kept Gardos around. On that note, said Army of Red were starting to put together how much Gardos had actually been manipulating them, including starting up the rebellion that they lost. Spoilers, but they would be proven right, and not surprisingly, he was hoping that the uproar would result in Yaiba ascending the throne faster, which was exactly what happened. We'd learn more about Gardos' machinations later, as Haku and Gordy also managed to make their own discovery at the sacred grounds. The former used his sword brave as a key to move a few blocks around as though this were a Zelda game, and they managed to find a treasure, which was a bringer droid, kind of like the ones in Yaiba's flashback. Back with Sand King and Amrello, and in spite of the latter actually playing optimally, Yaiba managed to make a complete come-from-behind victory because of his OP chicken. Like seriously, while IRL it probably wasn't the most broken card ever, as it practically needed a card like Yaiba Sword Brave to unleash its full potential, when your anime characters can get cards that they need for the sake of the plot, it becomes kind of ridiculous when this thing can almost always attack twice per turn. Regardless, Yaiba won, and thus dealt Amrello the most appropriate of punishments.
やめろ
王宮から追放する。
The Midnight Sun and Tsundere King. The 39th episode opened with Hakua and Gordy trying to transport the Bringer droid back to their ship with some mixed results. At the same time, we learned a little more about Suo and Rivori's relationship while the former was still patching up the latter.
研究の邪魔です後にしてください
Your brother used to be Hakua? Jeez, talk about a downgrade. But yeah, it was meant to show the complicated relationship between these two that we'd get some follow-up in the next couple of episodes. Meanwhile, Tsurugi had been playtesting a new deck that, as we'd see later, was clearly one that blended his light and dark decks together. Of course, he also made it as a symbolic gesture directly towards his brother, showing how he believed how the light and dark sword eyes should join together as a concerted effort. Yaiba somewhat agreed with this, even though, according to him, both sides were always destined to oppose each other, as dictated by the children's card game they played.
That makes sense to me.
Unsurprisingly, Knife and Bringer could explain this, but Yaiba had the power of deep lore by his side. As it turned out, the very spirits they fought with actually existed in their world long ago. Now, this is a particularly interesting little bit of world building that could apply to the whole franchise. In another series, they took place in present-day Japan, at least at the time, or a completely different isekai known as the Grand Rolo. And yet, they never stated where the spirits actually came from until this series. So, while this was the 5th Battle Spirit season to ever come out, it could also be seen as the origin point for all of the others. As for how the spirits crossed dimensions, well, that was likely thanks to the messengers spreading the cards, which, yeah, you could even go kind of meta and say that they had also reached our world. Though, as for why they had been converted to such portable forms, I'm starting to think the Lord Almighty has a thing for his Old Testament. Kidding, jeez. But yeah, the easily agitated god of this world had originally given life to the battle spirits before the creation of humans. However, be they man or beast, he still decided to test them by bestowing them with the fruits of knowledge to see how they'd react. And just like Adam and Eve, they chose rebellion. Thus, when the spirits tried to overthrow their creator, he turned them all into cards and sentenced them to the truly agonizing eternal hell of being forced to be played with by kids and grown-ass weebs alike. The only more vindictive god is probably the one who created Yu-Gi-Oh! And all of its FTK strategies. But yeah, on top of being his punishment, God had likely also done this as his own version of Noah's Ark by having his messengers spread the cards to new worlds full of his next creation, humans. And now that he was governing several much more relatively manageable worlds, he started to feel like he didn't need his original creation that gave him so much trouble in the first place. Granted, he did give this world one last test by bestowing them with a little knowledge onto a select few known as the Sword Eyes through their blades. He wanted them to lead the humans to fight amongst each other as an admission that they would never oppose him. Yeah, you see what I mean when I say I expect a little more world building even in my children's anime? Like, obviously, I'm not expecting everything to be a 10th Commandment epic, but I do think it's possible to take a little time and progressively build a well-defined world like this that is meant to sell an easily producible and cheap product. And all it would end up really costing them is a couple of episodes ending up being clip shows. Yeah, you might not have noticed this since we didn't really bring it up, but there was no real battles in this episode, instead just a recap of all of the Sword Braves introduced in the show so far. Though, while it was clearly meant to mostly fill a little time in the episode, it also did at least fit in with the theme that this was a lore dump. Anyway, this is also the reasoning behind Yaiba forcibly trying to bring all the Sword Eyes together to summon forth the Sword of Judgment and strike down the god who was already in the process of disposing of his original creation. Of course, this gave Tsurugi a little more respect for his brother, but in turn, and perhaps even beyond his original plans, Yaiba discovered a strong brother who could lead their people to his arc and salvation. Just some great character building, born off of a ton of world building. With that though, the episode ended with all of the Sword Eyes converging on Yaiba's castle, in particular Gordy and Hakua, who had found something interesting in the Bringer's black box. These episodes were pretty much all about lore dumping, and oh boy did they dump the load. That said, it was done fairly naturally, with the characters understandably trying to lay things out for each other, all the while increasing the general sense of urgency, which is what any good story should do. It's also kind of why we decided to start with this series, as really, it is kind of the origin point of everything. While it should go without saying, world building is kind of paramount to fantasy stories. It not only gets us interested in said world, but also helps to establish the character stakes in preserving the sanctity of such a setting. In the case of this show, the characters have been trying to restore what they perceive as the proper balance of power in a world that seemed like, and kind of was, being oppressed by Yaiba. And yet, much like that Grand Lagan comparison from last week, they discovered that their equivalent of the Spiral King was trying to protect them from an even even more oppressive force, and in both cases it was essentially God. Writing like that is not only epic, but as we said, it can even act as the basis for this entire franchise. And on the smaller scale of things, it does contextualize Yaiba's goals and why he would go to such lengths. In general, it really helps to develop his character, as he's even starting to open up to his brother and show more compassion to his vassals. It's all intriguing stuff, with the only thing I can kind of complain about is the lack of new battles in these episodes, but like the series' last recap episode, it is justifiable as they were in between new booster packs IRL, and it is for the sake of fleshing things out, so who really cares if there's a little lack of action? Because overall, these episodes were good preludes to the final arc of the series. The battle with God, as well as a certain someone, are about to begin, though sadly we won't be going to outer space, so oh well. Thank you for watching. As always, here's hoping that you're having a good week, and if not, well, you made it halfway through, didn't you? We just started working on some longer form video projects after this season ended up being a little busier than we originally expected, though don't worry, they should be well worth the wait. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and oop, looks like Atlas fell on his face again. Hold on, let me get the cart.